Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you how you can take your sketchbook design that you've created for a relief print illustration from your sketchbook and into Procreate. The first thing you'll want to do is go ahead and measure your exact drawing that you created. Mine ended up being 6 by 8 inches, which was determined by the actual linoleum block plate itself. Now that I have my drawing measured, I can go ahead and create a new canvas in Procreate and make sure that it lines up with my drawing size. Mine is 6 by 8 inches as mentioned, and one thing you'll want to make sure is that it matches the right measurements. So you want to have inches instead of pixels, and I would suggest having it at 300 dpi just to be sure. So now I have my image in my actual canvas, and I can go ahead and have the selection tool selected and go ahead and adjust it and make sure that it fits the actual canvas and that my most pertinent information is where I want it to be. It fits, there's some space. And once I get it to where I need it to be, I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer and then start drawing and tracing out my most pertinent information. You'll see that I made my original reference layer more transparent so that way I can see where my actual marks are happening. And on this new layer, I'm just going to go ahead and start inking into my piece and trying to get, again, the most relevant information as possible. And so for me, that's going to be the eggplant. Something I've noticed with Procreate and with drawing by hand is that sometimes it takes a little bit of effort and multiple tries to kind of get that natural rhythm down, so don't be afraid to erase things when you need to make sure that it really fits your natural drawing style. Procreate is a really great program and it has a lot of parallels with Photoshop. It does take a little bit of learning, and to be honest, I'm still learning it myself. So you'll notice some things I might do a little bit backwards, and that's just my own learning curve. And so here you can see I filled in the entire eggplant and it looks kind of spotty. I'm not sure why that happened, to be honest, but I'm working on it. But for me, it's still getting me to that point where I can see this space is colored, and now I can move on to the next part, which is kind of refining my text. So what I'm doing is just working into this black layer and drawing over it in white, so that way I can kind of capture that really funky kind of 70s style lettering that I'm using and cleaning it up, making it a little bit easier for me to see and digest. A really cool thing with Procreate is that if you create a closed shape, so for me it's a closed shape of a text using a line, I can go ahead and drag that color down from the color picker in the upper right hand corner and just kind of extend it into that actual area, so that way it's filling it in, similar to how Photoshop has its paint bucket. So similar with Photoshop, you always want to make sure you're working on the right layer, and I'm just trying to fix up some of this weird noise that got selected when I did a color fill, and again, that's okay. It's more or less I'm just working on my design and trying to get it to a little bit of a cleaner style, and that way I can trace it and transfer it onto my linoleum block once I get it finished. So I have kind of the skeleton or the outline of where I want this to go, and now it's just a matter of time before I get it to a point that feels good. So now that I have my background all cleaned up, I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer, and I'm actually going to go ahead and use red for this, so that way it has a really high contrast and I can see where my pencil and pen marks are happening. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and start coloring in my heart, and then I'm going to focus on the letters below. So one thing to notice is that for each color and each object, I tend to make a brand new layer, so that way I don't get confused and I can always go back and adjust things. With this particular design, I didn't really focus on the bottom group of text because I knew it was something that I could easily do in Procreate as opposed to my own hand drawing. So what I'm doing here is I'm focusing on that bottom line of text that says grow, using my own kind of funky handwriting style, and I'm just kind of creating a new layer for each letter, and I'm using the top text, the let, to sort of help me determine what my line and text height should look like, and kind of the structure and the overall visual look of the text itself. So each letter is getting its own layer, and again, just using the top section and using that red color to really help it pop, which I can go ahead and change that color in a little bit here. One thing you might notice is that I'm kind of aligning my text with certain elements of the text that's above it. So the W is getting set on top of the L because there are some visual similarities. There's kind of that vertical section that really matches the area of the L, where I don't really get that in the other letters. So I'm just using what I know and knowing that type itself comes from its own family and that there's a lot of interconnected ways that type can relate to one another and inform. So for example, my R could also be used to design a P, or my W could be used to design an M. So there's a lot of relation and just something to keep in mind if you are interested in doing more lettering. Now that I have all my lettering down for that bottom line of text, I went ahead and made some guides by just using some rectangles that are really skinny so that way they almost look like lines. And right now I'm just adjusting the spacing between the letters or the kerning and just making sure that it kind of matches the visual style that I created in the text above. Now that I have it in a place that I like it, I can go ahead and select each layer and I can go ahead and drag and drop the color into its place. I just have to make sure that I'm on the right layer at the right time. So right now I'm going to go ahead and do the R. I have to select my R layer and drag and drop that color from the color picker in the upper right hand corner. So the red again was just sort of this visual aid that helped me understand and see the contrast between my image. Now I could even go back and use my black studio inking pen and kind of fine-tune some of the areas and make sure that my text is exactly how I want it to be. I still want it to have that fun and hand-drawn aesthetic to it, so I'm just kind of refining it and making sure that it fits the style that I'm going for, and from there I can even go ahead and start grouping some of my layers and making it a little bit easier for me to work with. And now just for a visual guide for myself, I'm going to go ahead and just use the black studio inking pen and kind of refine my image one last time before I get into some of the background detail. And for me, that's just cleaning up some of the spottiness, some of the noise that is in the original eggplant design, and then also getting rid of the vine that I had drawn because I have kind of a new plan or approach, and that was more or less just a study to help get me started. So now I can just kind of adjust things as I see fit and make sure that it makes sense for kind of the overall appearance of my image. And again, it's really great because I have my most pertinent areas on their own layer, and that way I can adjust things as needed. So again, just like Photoshop, working in layers whenever you need and getting rid of any layers that you might not need. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a drawing guide by going into Actions and then Drawing Guide, and I'm going to go ahead and select Symmetry and Assisted Drawing. I just want to make sure those things are turned on, and I can go ahead and adjust my center point on this drawing guide's screen, and from there it should be all set to go. So what I want to do with this is kind of match the original style that I had, and if you remember, it kind of looked like a vine that was traveling down and just kind of had some more floral kind of elements to it. And this drawing guide is great because it's going to match what I'm doing on one side or half of the drawing and match it to the other side. And because this drawing is more stylized, it might not be 100% perfect and central, but that's okay. I'm just going to do my best and see what works best for myself and the design. As you can see, it makes it really easy and effortless and saves you a lot of time and just kind of has that really beautiful congruency kind of look to it. So I'm going to go ahead and flesh out these leaves and just add whatever details that I feel are necessary. Now that I have my vines drawn, I want to go ahead and find an image online of an eggplant blossom so that way I can kind of get a general sense or idea of what these blossoms actually look like. So I'm going to go ahead and screen grab that and then import that into my actual working canvas document by going to add a new layer and then Actions, add, insert a photo, and then I can go ahead and resize this image to be exactly in the space and location that I want it to be. Now from there I can add a new layer on top of this actual photo image, and I can start kind of rendering in exactly what I think this eggplant blossom should look like, and at least trying to capture its essence the best I can. So once I get it to a point where I'm happy, I'm just going to kind of refine it and make sure it has the necessary lines that I feel are necessary for my particular drawing style. And from there I can go ahead and kind of hide my actual photo image of the eggplant blossom and then take my actual drawing layer and kind of move that around, and so that way it feels natural and kind of just sorting out what the visual look is that I'm going for. So I might have to erase some of my other layers so that way they don't bleed through, but that's just something you can adjust as needed. And you'll notice because it's on the assisted drawing layer, it's actually deleting from both sides. And so when something's selected, you can go ahead and change the actual orientation by flipping it and rotating it and so on. So since I duplicated this, now I'm just kind of adjusting the secondary side and making sure everything fits exactly where I want it to. I'm feeling really happy with this overall eggplant design that I have, but I'm just going to go ahead and start making some marks in my piece on a layer of its own by using the white, so that way it can kind of get the essence of this relief print image that I plan on doing, and just kind of getting those carving marks down that feel necessary and that I can easily carve into my actual plate once this image is transferred. Hopefully you found that helpful in understanding how you can take your original drawing in your sketchbook, whether it be a design or illustration, and how you can fine-tune it and clean it up in a program like Procreate. The next phase of this project will be to trace this image directly from the iPad and then transferring it onto the linoleum block. If you want to learn more about this fun and unique process, feel free to find me on Skillshare in the links below, where you'll find a ton of different classes relating to the relief printmaking field. Thank you so much for watching.